My dear students of class 8A and 8B, today I am going to teach you lesson number 8, policies of British expansion. Policies of British expansion. My dear students of class 8 and 8A and 8B, welcome to my history class. Now I am going to teach you lesson number 8, topic policies of British expansion. Now, what are the points of my teaching today's teaching? The following points are there according to which I am going to teach you. First point, terms of subsidiary alliance. Already in my previous class I discussed about some terms of the subsidiary alliance and what was subsidiary alliance, who introduced it. In my previous class I discussed about it. It was Lord Wellesley who introduced the subsidiary alliance. And what are the terms of the subsidiary alliance? Some terms already I have discussed, and now the remaining part of the terms. The rulers had to accept, according to the terms of the subsidiary alliance, the Indian rulers had to accept one British resident in their courts. And one British resident was posted as the agent of the British East India Company. He was posted as the agent of British East India Company, and his main work was to promote British interests. And second term is that the Indian ruler had to take permission before the Indian rulers had to take permission of the company or the British company if he had to meet any foreign delegates, or if he had to allow any leaders of India for bilateral talking. And the British resident, and when another point is that the Indian ruler had to take permission from the British resident when he wanted to negotiate with other Indian states. And second and third term, the rulers would not enter into any alliance with other foreign powers or indigenous. The rulers of India would not allow to enter into any alliance with other powers, indigenous or foreign. But nor could they declare any war against any power, any state, without the permission of the British. That means before declaring any war against any Indian states, they had to take the permission of the British resident. And point number 4, the Indian rulers, term number 4, the Indian rulers who already declared war against the British East India Company once and were defeated by them, they were forced to sign the terms of the subsidiary alliance. That means once upon a time, the Indian rulers who declared war against British East India Company and were defeated by them, now under the terms of the subsidiary alliance, they had to sign the terms of the subsidiary alliance. So, by introducing the following terms of the subsidiary alliance, the British East India Company forcefully expanded their territories in India and included so many Indian states with them. These states who signed, many Indian states entered into the subsidiary alliance. The first ruler to enter the subsidiary alliance was the Nizam of Hyderabad. And then Nizam was followed. The Nizam of Hyderabad was followed by, the ruler of Mysore, the Rajput kings, the Nawab of Ayodh, and finally the kings of the Maharashtra, means the Marathas. So by this way, all powerful rulers of India, who once declared war against the British and were defeated, they were forcefully included into the alliance by the British. By this way, almost all states of India came under the control of the British East India Company under the terms of the subsidiary alliance. And next one, role of British resident. One British resident, the Indian rulers who signed the subsidiary alliance had to seek, means Indian rulers who were forcefully signed the terms of the subsidiary alliance. They had to accept one post, the British resident. That means the ruler had to accept the British resident in his school. The British ruler had to accept one British resident in his school. Suppose one ruler signed the terms of the subsidiary alliance. The ruler had to accept one British resident in his school. Now, question is, why was the British resident appointed by the British? Or why was the British resident posted in the court of that particular Indian ruler? The British resident was posted to see and watch over the activities of the rulers, where his office was established. And not only that, the main work of the British resident was to ensure was to promote the British interest. And besides, the British resident forbade the Indian rulers from signing any alliance with other Indian powers or other foreign powers. If they wanted to talk to any rulers of other state, they had to take permission of the British resident. So the post and the office of the British resident was most important, and they also carved their independence and made them completely dependent on them. That's why the role of the British resident was very important. And next point, advantageous alliance to the British. Which one is the advantageous alliance to the British? The subsidiary alliance. The subsidiary alliance was the advantageous alliance to the British. Now, how was it advantageous to the British? Now I am going to discuss about it. It was advantageous to the British because the alliance made the British self-sufficient. The British were able to extend their territories in different parts of India by means of the terms of the subsidiary alliance. So the British East India Company expanded their territories without declaring any war against any Indian rulers, but under the terms of the subsidiary alliance. Under the terms of the subsidiary alliance, almost all Indian states came under their control. As a result of it, the alliance also had become advantageous to the British East India Company. The British Empire now was able to maintain their troops, and they forcefully instructed the Indian rulers who signed the alliance to maintain the British troops at their expense. So by this way, Indian states, almost all Indian states who signed the alliance, they had become become dependent on the British East India Company. That's why this alliance proved beneficial to the company in the long run. Apart from this, the most important impact of the subsidiary alliance. What was the impact of the subsidiary alliance? The impact of the subsidiary alliance was, number one, the territories of the Indian rulers could be taken away. The territories of the Indian rulers could be taken away at the time when they failed to maintain British troops. Thus, the British Empire was able to expand their territories without declaring any war. And second impact of the alliance was maintaining the British troops was an expensive affair by the Indian states or Indian rulers who entered into the subsidiary alliance, were forced to maintain the troops of the British at their expenses, and were able to, the British were able to maintain a large army at the expense of whom? At the expense of the Indian rulers. And finally, the presence of the British resident in the court reduced the power and influence of the foreign powers. Since there was a term that before signing any alliance, before starting any negotiation with any foreign rulers or any local rulers or any other states, they had to take permission. They had to take prior permission from the British resident, or under another term, it was decided that no Indian state would sign any alliance with any foreign powers without taking permission of the British. No, it was not there. They forbade them from signing any alliance. It was mandatory. The British East India Company forbade Indian rulers who signed the terms of subsidiary alliance from signing any alliance with any foreign power. And before starting any negotiation with other states, they had to take permission of the British resident, and they had to make it clear to the British resident why were they going to negotiate with any Indian states. What are its utilities? Whether the British would become loser. The British resident tried to make sure whether their interest in that concern would become loser, whether they would be loser. In order to make it confirm, the British resident saw and watched over the activities of the Indian rulers who signed the terms of the subsidiary alliance. So that subsidiary alliance, last point, the subsidiary alliance was very much beneficial to the British, advantageous to the British as a result of it. Why? Because many Indian states, they were forcefully signed the subsidiary alliance and they came under the control of the British. As I taught you earlier, the first Indian state to sign the subsidiary alliance was the Nizam of Hyderabad, and second one who signed the subsidiary alliance was, the kings of Mysore, because the kings of Mysore once declared war against the British and were defeated by the British. As a result of it, under the term of the subsidiary alliance, it was decided that Indian states who once declared war against the British were forcefully come into the alliance of the British subsidiary alliance. So they had to sign the subsidiary alliance and its term. Because of that reason, once they declared war against the British and were defeated. So by this way, many Indian states automatically came under the terms of under British control without declaring war. These states were the Mysore and the Marathas, because Mysore fought against the British East India Company and considered defeat. At the same time, the Marathas also declared war against the British and also considered defeat. So both these two states automatically came under the control of the subsidiary alliance and its term, and the British East India Company was able to extend their territories towards Mysore and Maharashtra. And apart from this, another one also came and came into the alliance of the subsidiary. Who was he? He was the Nawab of Ayodh, Sujauddullah. He signed the subsidiary alliance, not Sujauddullah, because that time Sujauddullah was not there. The next ruler, that means you have to write only this much. The subsidiary alliance, along with other Indian states, the Nawab of Ayodh also signed the alliance of also signed the subsidiary terms of the subsidiary alliance. Only this much you have to write. So by this way, the British influence, the British influence in India was increased, and the influence of other foreign powers also was curtailed, also was reduced, and ultimately company was able to extend their territories in different parts of India. Up to this, my dear students, next day the remaining part, and I shall give you some homework. Already I have given you. Please make your homework in your homework copies. Thank you.